The history of humanity is blessed with endless, intriguing facts. However, beyond key dates and names that you learned about in your history class, there is a wide range of events that you weren't taught. So stay tuned as we tell you 20 historical facts you didn't know. Number 20. London was sold for a needle. The sale of London Bridge to an American oil tycoon in 1968 is a story that has become legendary. A common myth is that Robert P. McCulloch, the buyer, thought he was purchasing the iconic Tower Bridge, but that's just a rumor. What's certain is that he bought the London Bridge for nearly $2.5 million and moved it to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, where it still stands today. The rumor gained popularity because people couldn't believe that someone would buy a simple bridge, dismantle it, and move it thousands of miles away. However, the bridge was not doing well in London due to increased traffic load that it was not designed for, and it needed to be replaced. The selling of the bridge and its removal to Arizona has made it an interesting tourist attraction and an amazing piece of history. Number 19. The first female self-made millionaire in America was a black woman. Born as Sarah Breedlove in 1867 to former slaves, Madam C.J. Walker faced numerous obstacles. Despite her challenging early life, she paved her path to unprecedented success. Suffering from a scalp ailment resulting in hair loss, she responded inventively. In 1905, she created a range of hair care products specifically for African Americans. Walker didn't stop there. She pioneered Madam C.J. Walker Laboratories, manufacturing and promoting her unique products. Her initiatives not only garnered her a significant personal fortune, making her America's first self-made female millionaire, but also established her as a powerful role model. Moreover, Walker was a generous philanthropist, contributing financial aid to various organizations. She passionately supported arts, patronizing several artists. Her opulent mansion, Villa Lawaro, is now a National Historic Landmark, testament to her enduring legacy. Madam C.J. Walker's inspiring journey showcases the triumph of tenacity and ingenuity over adversity. Number 18. Women were once banned from smoking in public. On January 21, 1908, the Sullivan Ordinance was passed in New York City, which made it illegal for women to smoke in public. Many women didn't take the edict seriously until Mayor George McClellan vetoed it 2 weeks later. But rather than punish the woman that engaged in the act, the edict put the business owners on whose establishment any woman is spotted smoking at fault. It was reported that one woman, Katie Mulcahy, was the only person known to ever break the ordinance. Although there were no specified actions against her, she was asked to pay a fine of $1.05, but was arrested after she refused to pay. The basis of the ordinance would appear flimsy to you. However, back then, a woman that smoked a cigarette was considered dangerously sexual, immoral, and not to be trusted. Isn't that weird? But men were free to smoke anytime and anywhere they wished. That the government made an attempt to ban only women from smoking says a lot about how society perceived the women folk. Number 17. Forks were considered a sacrilege. Do you know that the forks you often use at the dining were once regarded to be sacrilegious? In other words, by using them, you committed a great abomination. Forks were first introduced in Italy in the 11th century and were considered artificial hands and, as such, sacrilegious. After all, God has given us our fingers as natural forks. Forks have been around for quite a while, but it wasn't until the Middle Ages that they became widely used as kitchen utensils. The labeling of the use of forks as blasphemous started in the 11th century when a Byzantine princess scandalized the court by bringing forks to her new husband's Venetian household. She brought a golden fork at a time when most Europeans still ate with their fingers and knives. A local clergy would see the act of substituting natural forks, that is, fingers for artificial ones. It wasn't until the early 18th century that the use of forks became acceptable in England. Initially, people were using two-pronged forks. It took another 100 years to add the third and fourth prongs. Eventually, forks became more of a social matter. While some societies would accept its usage, others would mock those who used them. Number 16. The Titanic's owners never said the ship was unsinkable. If you saw James Cameron's iconic 1997 film, you'd probably believe that the owners of Titanic actually ruled out the possibility of the ship sinking. But that's not true. Some trade publications had described the ship as practically unsinkable prior to her sinking. In fact, Many survivors claimed that they decided to be a part of the maiden voyage because they had considered the ship unsinkable. Here's the truth about the myth. Shipbuilder Harland and Wolff did not claim the ship was unsinkable. It was actually a promotional item from the White Star Line that stressed the safety of Olympics and Titanic. In its claims, it said thus, "As far as it is possible to do so, these two wonderful vessels are designed to be unsinkable." Then, there was a growing belief that science was the answer to all human problems. However, the sinking of the Titanic made people have less confidence in science. Number 15. The first face on the $1 bill was not George Washington. When you hear the name George Washington, the first image that probably pops into your head is the picture of the first president that adorns the $1 paper dollar. Perhaps you could have tried to wonder how he ended up on the note. During the Civil War, the U.S. government had to print new forms of currency in addition to the numerous paper money in circulation earlier. The goal was to fund its war effort. It was at this time that it created the first official paper currency. One of the bills created at the time, in 1862, was the official $1 bill, whose early version featured the then Secretary of the Treasury and designer of the country's first banknotes, Salmon Chase. Initially, the money printed was not backed by anything and became known as greenbacks. After the U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing took over the production of U.S. currency, George Washington's image then appeared on the $1 bill in 1869. Since its recreation in 1963, the $1 bill has not been redesigned, and there are no plans to do so in the nearest future. Number 14. Johnny Appleseed was actually real. American folklore is so populated that it becomes difficult to identify which ones are fiction and which are real. In the case of Johnny Appleseed, the folklore hero who is said to have traveled on foot across the United States planting apple trees, we are actually looking at a real person. Although some aspects of his life have ended up being mythologized over time, Appleseed's real name was John Chapman, and his hometown was Leominster, Massachusetts. He planted his first apple tree nurseries around 1798 in the Allegheny Valley in Pennsylvania, and then began planting everywhere he went. He would walk for miles every day and sleep outdoors, planting nurseries in the spots where the pioneers would settle. On how he earned his nick, he often carried a bag of apple seeds with him. In fact, a street was named after him, though his mythical name was preferred by the city planners. Number 13. India has not invaded any country in the last 10,000 years. In early 2022, India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh asserted that India, in its long history, had never invaded or tried to conquer another country in the last 10,000 years. However, India is one of the most invaded countries in the world. But why did the nation choose not to invade other territories? Let's dive a bit into history. India started existing as a united nation in 1947. At that time, several autonomous factions frequently waged war on each other. It was only during the reigns of the Marathas, Rajputs, Mughals, and Mauryas that the Indian subcontinent was mostly governed as one. Several attempts by some powerful empires, including the Greeks, Mongols, and Persians, to conquer ancient India failed. Most countries invade other nations to meet a need or out of greed. Fortunately, India has always had enough resources for exploitation and was also a major global trade hub throughout history. So there was no point in trying to invade other sovereign nations. Though its rulers sent emissaries to spread Buddhism and Hinduism, the campaigns were peaceful. Number 12. France built a fake Paris to fool German bombers during World War I. The French government tried to outsmart the Germans during World War I by building a fake Paris. The Paris was built out of fear of a possible overnight aerial attack. The fake Paris town, which featured replicas of famous landmarks, was built miles away from the actual Paris. The idea was conceived in 1917, a few years after the Germans first bombed Paris in 1914. Bloomberg reported that the lights in actual Paris were turned off at night during the real attacks. But in the constructed fake Paris, there would be dim lights to make it appear like people were trying, but just couldn't keep themselves undetected in the dark. Unfortunately, fake Paris was never actually completely constructed after the war ended in 1918. As planned by Ferdinand Jacopozzi, an Italian engineer, the city would have 3 zones, but only one out of them was ever constructed. The fake city was deconstructed when the war ended. As you'd expect, the plan was kept as classified information. Number 11. Albert Einstein was once offered the presidency of Israel. Many people know famous Jewish scientist Albert Einstein for his discoveries in theoretical physics, but not all of them know he also had the opportunity to shine in the political world. Following the death of Chaim Weizmann, Israel's first president in 1952, the Israeli government, then headed by Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, offered the presidency to Einstein. According to history, the role was more of an honor than a position of power and authority. The reason for the consideration to honor him was simple. Throughout his life, Einstein consistently supported the state of Israel. One would think that he would be glad to accept the offer. Unfortunately, Einstein declined the offer immediately on the basis of his advancing age and lack of relevant skills. He, in fact, refused an official meeting with representatives of the Israeli embassy. Although Einstein would be allowed to continue engaging in scientific research while president, he would have to relocate to Israel. Since Einstein declined the offer, Zionist leader Itzhak Ben-Zvi assumed the role later that year. Number 10. The shortest war in history lasted 38 to 45 minutes. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, fought between the United Kingdom and the Sultanate of Zanzibar on the 27th of August 1896, holds the record as the shortest war in history. The war, triggered by the Sultan's death and subsequent succession against British wishes, commenced with a British bombardment of the Sultan's palace at 9:02 a.m. and ceased 45 minutes later when the Sultan's forces surrendered. Number 9. The lost city of Heraklion is under the sea. Heraklion, also known by its Egyptian name Thonis, was an ancient lost city thought to be myth until it was rediscovered underwater in the year 2000. According to ancient texts, Heraklion was where Helen of Troy and her lover Paris hid before the start of the Trojan War. It was also where the Greek hero Heracles arrived, providing the city with its Greek name. Located near the mouth of the Nile River, Heraklion was one of the most important trading ports in the Mediterranean world before it sank more than 1,000 years ago. The city is thought to have succumbed to a combination of sea level rise, land subsidence, and a major earthquake or tsunami that ultimately caused the unstable sediment it was built upon to liquefy, sinking it beneath the sea. Underwater archaeologist Frank Godiot and his team discovered the city in Aboukir Bay, near Alexandria, with many of its statues, coins, weights, and other artifacts amazingly preserved in the sea. The find proved that Heraklion was more than a myth and shed light on a civilization forgotten by time. Number 8. The Persians once used cats as shields in the Battle of Pelusium. You might have read about how cats caused the ancient Egyptians to lose the Pelusium War. The ancient Egyptians once worshipped cats so much that they wouldn't kill them even if it would cost them their lives. They believed that cats were the manifestation of goddess Bastet, a goddess of the home, fertility, and women's secrets. The affection of ancient Egyptians for cats became so glaring during the Persian invasion of Egypt. The king of Persians, Cambyses II, who reigned from 529 to 522 BC, knew how much the Egyptians treasured their cats. So the Persians collected as many cats as they could, and put cats as well as dogs and sheep in front of their soldiers during the battle. Yes, apart from cats, ancient Egyptians also worshipped dogs and sheep. The Persians also painted an image of cats on their shields. The ancient Egyptians were reluctant to kill the cats out of fear of incurring the wrath of goddess Bastet. They had no choice but to flee the battlefield, thus losing the Battle of Pelusium in 525 BC and falling under the control of the Persians. Number 7. The Greeks thought that beans held the souls of people who had died. Pythagoras was a Greek mathematician and philosopher. You might remember him from your geometry class. He also had his own group of followers. His followers lived together, studied the universe, and didn't eat meat. But unlike vegetarians today, who don't eat meat, Pythagorean followers didn't eat beans. They just thought that broad beans, which are also called fava beans, were a supernatural sign of death and avoided them. Pythagoras' idea that eating beans was like eating people attracted a lot of attention, even from ancient writers. Pythagoreans thought that kava beans could hold the souls of the dead because they looked like flesh. Some people thought that the plant's black-spotted flowers and hollow stems were bridges between Earth and Hades that souls could use to get to heaven. What Pythagoras really hated ended up being the thing that killed him. People say that he hid from a dictator for a while by living in a cave. He was trying to get away from people who wanted to hurt him, but they followed him and caught up to him when a field of flowering fava beans blocked his way and he couldn't run any farther. Number 6. Alexander the Great was accidentally buried alive. Alexander the Great established what could be regarded as the largest empire of the ancient world. At the age of 25, his army overcame the Persian territories of Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt without a single defeat. Unfortunately, he suddenly died in Babylon at the age of 32. For decades, historians have puzzled over the cause of his death. Some attributed it to typhoid, while others to alcoholism or even poison. But the mystery of his death may have finally been solved. The military genius suffered from a neurological disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome. The rare disease left him paralyzed for 6 days. The disease left him unable to move, speak, and breathe. It was possible that the ancient Macedonian ruler was still alive, while his soldiers prepared his body for burial in 323 BC. Dr. Catherine Hall of the Dunedin School of Medicine in New Zealand concluded that Alexander's real death was 6 days later than previously accepted. Therefore, his death may be considered the most famous case of pseudo-thanatos, otherwise known as a false diagnosis of death ever recorded. Number 5. There were female gladiators in ancient Rome. Though sparse, evidence exists in art, laws, and written accounts of the participation of women gladiators in the brutal sport during the Roman Empire. They fought each other fiercely with weapons for entertainment, but not nearly to the same degree as men did. Women of all classes, including the elite, participated. However, only the affluent women could afford training and had enough time to work out. In the 1st century BC, women could be seen engaging in a series of battles after dinner. These battles, especially against beasts, dwarfs, and other women in spectacles, were hosted by emperors Nero, Titus, and Domitian in the thriving city of Pompeii. A female gladiator was known as a gladiatrix. Female gladiators, or gladiatrices, were marketed as a novelty attraction. In 11 and 19 AD, the Roman Senate passed laws prohibiting middle and upper-class women from fighting as gladiators. Number 3. The Bloody Mary drink wasn't initially called Bloody Mary. The original Bloody Mary dates back to 16th century England. At that time, Frenchman Ferdinand Petit-Petitot worked in a New York-style bar in Paris, where canned tomato juice was brought from the States. Russians fleeing their homeland during the Russian Revolution came to France with vodka and caviar. The bartender would later create a special taste of vodka bland by combining American canned tomato juice with Russian vodka and various spices. That was how the Bloody Mary was birthed. The cocktail was initially named the Bucket of Blood by an American as a reminder of a Chicago nightclub with a similar name. When the drink returned to the United States, it was known as the Red Snapper. It is now known as Bloody Mary. Although there's no definite answer as to how the cocktail became known as Bloody Mary, there's no denying that it remains one of the most popular cocktails today. Number 2. Athletes in the ancient Olympics performed naked. For a very long time, nudity has been a part of the Olympics. It started in the 8th century. Athletes competed naked as a means of honoring the Greek god Zeus. They wanted to show off their muscular physique and physical power as a way of also intimidating their opponents. The athletes drew inspiration from the depiction of the nudity of Greek heroes in artwork and sculptures. They were further inspired by the artworks to train harder and ultimately win their event. For the ancient Greeks, anyone that became a victorious Olympic athlete was considered a demigod. Some accounts hold that Orsippus, a runner from Megara, was the first athlete to compete naked. It was said that his loincloth fell accidentally during a foot race, an event that made him run faster. Number 1. Russia ran out of vodka, celebrating the end of World War II. On May 9, 1945, the news that Nazi Germany had surrendered threw the citizens of the Soviet Union into wild jubilation that even non-drinkers began to drink. On what necessitated the jubilation, the act of surrendering indicated the end of the Great Patriotic War, which cost the state the loss of more than 26 million people. Approximately 22 hours after the start of the celebration of the victory, Joseph Stalin addressed the nation. However, at that time, the population had consumed all the vodka reserves in the country, an unusual activity. The whole nation fell into a hangover, which was considered a price for the liberation of Europe from the dominance of Nazi Germany. It is important to note that there was a shortage of vodka in the Soviet Union during wartime. Rather than utilize starch and grain to produce alcohol, they were used to produce food and supply the army. However, the production of vodka wasn't completely stopped. Even during the famine of the early 1930s, the nation ensured that it made grain and potatoes available for vodka production. It's one of the reasons why vodka revenues provided about 1/5 of the Russian government revenues. What other historical facts do you know? Make sure you share with us in the comments.